In a small town on the East Coast, a rainy spring evening settled in. People hurried home under umbrellas, but on the central square, there was a special atmosphere. Tomorrow the president himself was expected to arrive, not to deliver another political speech, but to open a new children's center, a place where kids from poor families could study, play, heal, and simply feel safe. Everyone in town was talking about it, in cafes, barber shops, on the streets. Children painted posters with words like "Thank you," and "Our future begins here." For them, it was a miracle, the attention of the president. But while the town prepared for celebration, a dim light flickered in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts. Inside sat men who didn't want this center. They were criminals, used to ruling the blocks through fear. One of them said, "If the kids get protection, if people believe the government cares about them, we lose power. We need to strike so hard they'll never forget." Another, with a cigarette between his teeth, replied, "Well, strike at the children. At the weakest point. If they think the president can protect them, well, prove them wrong." And while the town prepared for joy, a conspiracy was born in the shadows. The next morning was bright and sunny. It felt as if even the weather had decided to gift this day to the children. Hundreds gathered in the square. Balloons, music, laughter. Kids held drawings and flowers. Parents smiled, many recording everything on their phones. The motorcade arrived, and the crowd broke into applause. The president stepped out, a tall man with tired but steady eyes. He didn't look like a cold politician, but rather a man long carrying the weight of responsibility. He raised his hand and smiled at the children. "My dear ones," he began at the microphone, "today we open more than just a building. We open the future. This center is a symbol that every child deserves protection, care, and love. Our future is our children, and we must defend them at any cost." The crowd erupted in applause. Cameras clicked. Reporters rushed to capture every word. After the speech, he went inside. The halls were filled with new toys, computers, classrooms. Children ran around laughing, hugging him. One little girl handed him a heart she had drawn. He knelt, took the drawing, and said, "Thank you, Princess. I'll keep this forever." Everyone was happy. It looked like the beginning of a new life. Nobody yet knew that night would bring horror. That same evening, while children were still sharing impressions with their parents, fear crept into the town. The criminals, following their plan, set fire to the children's center. At first, there was only the smell of smoke. Then flames engulfed the walls. Inside were several children whose parents hadn't yet picked them up after the celebration. Teachers tried to get them out, but the fire spread too quickly. Screams, panic, small hands reaching out for adults, smoke choking the air. Some children escaped through windows, others remained inside. That night, lives were lost. The president learned about it within the hour. He arrived at the burning center, where firefighters and medics were already at work. His face was pale, his eyes filled with pain. He approached an ambulance where a boy with burns lay on a stretcher. The president took his hand. The boy whispered weakly, "You promised that we would be safe." Tears rolled down the president's cheeks. He fell to his knees on the wet asphalt. "Forgive me, son. Forgive me." Journalists stood silent, recording everything. The whole world saw a president crying with his people. Later, at the hospital, he sat by the bed of a girl who had survived the fire. She couldn't speak, her eyes full of terror. He leaned close and whispered, "I swore to protect you, and now I will do everything to make that oath real." From that moment, he was no longer just a head of state. He was a man personally wounded, and he was ready to strike back. After the fire, the country fell into shock. News channels ran the images nonstop: the burning center, crying parents, the president standing in smoke with his head bowed. People demanded answers. Who dared strike at children? At the same time, in the dark basement of that warehouse, the gang gathered again. Their leader, known as Coyote, was a ruthless man with cold eyes. Sitting at the table, he said, "We've taken the first step, but this is just the beginning. Now the president is bound to these children. If we take more and set our terms, the whole nation will kneel. And if he refuses?" One henchman asked. Coyote smirked. "Then we'll make him the killer of his own children, and let the whole world see it." Their plan was clear: abduction. The president, meanwhile, was at the hospital. He personally visited the surviving children. Doctors tried to stop him, but he waved them away. "I am not a president here. I am a man who must stand beside them." He sat by their beds, held small hands, listened to their whispers. Each time, the pain in his heart grew. He felt guilty, even though he knew logically it wasn't his fault. That same evening, He was told a group of armed men had kidnapped several children off the street, forcing them into a truck. The president clenched his fists. From this moment, this is not just a crime. This is war, and I'm going to the front line. His advisors tried to stop him. He refused. That night, the hunt began. Police and special forces blocked neighborhoods, intercepted vehicles. The president wasn't in a command room. He was with them, in an armored car, watching the operation unfold. In one alley, they managed to stop a van. A gunfight erupted. Bullets screamed, people shouted. Defying orders, the president got out, took cover behind a wall, helping direct the assault. His voice was steady. Hold the line. Flank right. The kids are inside. When the fight ended, they opened the van, but there were no children, only toys and blankets left behind. The kidnappers had transferred them to another vehicle. The president ground his teeth. They're playing with lives. But this will be their last game. The investigation revealed something worse. There was an informant in the president's inner circle. Someone had been leaking routes and plans. That's why the criminals were always ahead. The news hit hard. The president gathered his closest people and said, I don't know who the traitor is. But know this, when the truth comes out, I will look him in the eyes myself. That night he didn't sleep. He stood by the window, thinking of his daughter. He imagined if she were in those hands. And then he knew, he had no right to stop. The trail led to the old port. Huge warehouses, the smell of rust and sea. That's where the children were held. The president insisted on going with the team. When they entered, dozens of armed men were waiting. Coyote stood in the middle, cages with children beside him. Well, here is our hero, he sneered. Want to save them? Give yourself up. The president stepped forward. If my life is the price for theirs, take it. But then an explosion ripped the air. Special forces stormed in. Chaos erupted. Bullets, shouts, blasts. The president threw himself into the fight, shielding the children with his body. A bullet grazed his side, but he kept going. Coyote tried to flee, but the president caught him. Their fight was brutal and short. In the end, Coyote hit the concrete, and the president, bleeding, unlocked the cages. You're free, he told the children, smiling through pain. Morning brought silence. The children were safe. The gang was destroyed or arrested. The president lay in a hospital bed, wounded but alive. At his side sat the same girl who had survived the fire. She held his hand and said, You kept your promise. He smiled. As long as even one heart believes in the light, no darkness can win. Outside, children laughed again. They played at the rebuilt center, never knowing what it had cost them. The president looked out the window and knew the war was not over. Somewhere out there was the traitor who had betrayed them all. But for now, he had the most important thing, to see children smile again.